What if the biggest breakthrough in your health journey wasn't in what you do, but in how you think? Today, we're diving into the transformative role of mindset and how you think impacts your life. And today I have Allison Steinke here with me, and I'm so grateful for you to join me. We have so much in common with our story, and so I know it's going to be a really powerful conversation about how things from our childhood inform the way we see the world, and then even how we choose relationships. And so I'm just really excited for us to have this conversation and allow people to see what's possible when you start recognizing wounding and your thought process so that you can transform your life and create one that is aligned with who you are and who God says you are, and allowing you to really embrace that love of God. So thank you, Allison, so much for being here with me today.
Thank you, Megan, for having me. It's a pleasure.
And welcome to you, audience, to the It's Your Story to Tell podcast. If you've been watching, you know I'm Megan Babcock, the host of this show. So, Allison, why don't you take us all the way back as you've done this work, right? I mean, if you're in the middle of a stuck place, a very chaotic mindset, you may not even know where that's coming from. But what we're going to be talking about is how you can discover that, because you really have to get to that root of where did this all even start in order to start unwinding it all.
How far back do you want me to go? Childhood? Well, somehow I got the idea that I had to be the fixer and the healer and sacrifice myself for other people. So I remember we were going through a terrible time at home, and my mom was off crying in one place, my dad was off somewhere else, and I comforted them both individually and then brought them back together and then went off by myself to cry. And I was a young child at the time. My mom had her struggles, but she loved me, and my dad loved me too, but he was very busy and emotionally unavailable. So somehow I got the idea that I had to make everybody happy and I had to sacrifice myself in the process.
So, Allison, you're sharing how you were this young child really in tune with other people's emotional needs, but others maybe not so in tune with what your needs were, as demonstrated by you going and having to cry alone after comforting your parents. Would you say that it had an impact on your relationship choices as you grew older? And tell me a little bit about the past relationships. I know when we were talking before, you ended up as a teenager in an unhealthy relationship. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, I really didn't have boundaries, and I felt like I had to be absolutely perfect in order to deserve any love or any respect from people. And looking back, I'm amazed at some of the things I allowed happen. I ended up in one abusive relationship, and I tried to get out because I knew it was bad. He was, physically, he's abusive in every way. And I decided I can't leave because he keeps telling me, well, I did this because you did this. So everything that he did was my fault. So I actually had to wait until he he actually kind of kidnapped me. I was at home in my pajamas and he wanted to talk to me. He's like, come get in the car. I just want to talk. So I got in the car, we were talking, and then he drove me back to his place. I said, I don't even have shoes on. Like, I'm in my pajamas. I don't want to do this. But of course, he didn't care. So I went back and we talked for a bit and we had a bit of an argument. And so I said, well, can you drive me home? He said, no. I said, okay. So I got out to walk and he said, no, wait, no girlfriend of mine is going to walk home alone in the dark. So, relief, he was going to drive me home. He's like, so you're not my girlfriend anymore. So I walked home, praying that a policeman would come by and give me a ride. No one showed up, which I think was providential because I had to take the painful steps and walk the hour and a half or whatever it was home in my bare feet in order to really solidify how bad this was and that I had every right to leave. The next day he came over, and this time he couldn't say, oh, you did this wrong, therefore I had every right to hurt you. I did everything perfectly. And it's sad that that's what it took for me to stand up for myself, but that's where my head was at. Next day he came over as if nothing had happened. I said, what are you doing here? He's like, what do you mean? I said, we're not together. Get out. So he left, and that was the end of it. When I met my husband, I thought, oh, he's nothing like my abuser. I know what abuse is. He's nothing like him, so he must be great. And he was okay. I mean, at the beginning, he was unemotionally available, just like my dad was kind of emotionally unavailable. The difference is my dad was busy, whatever, and I didn't. I always think the best of people. I always give the people the benefit of the doubt, and I do that too much. So I thought, oh, he doesn't understand how to come for me when I'm sad. And I realized years later, no, he actually didn't really care that I was sad. So I was always trying to find ways to get my dad to show affection to me. Not that he was mean, but he was just busy. So I found a man who I had to strive after to try and earn his love. I never did succeed at that. And then, yeah, it was our honeymoon the first time he actually started to criticize me and said, "You're too romantic." And that was just the beginning, and it just got progressively worse after that. But it all went back to childhood and somehow believing that I had to sacrifice myself for everybody else, that everyone else was worth more than me. And yet so desperately needing that love in order to feel okay about myself.
Yeah. Well, I can so identify with what you're sharing. In my own journey, I idolize my dad. My dad is amazing, and he um, loved us in the way that he knew how to demonstrate love. And I would say for me was emotionally unavailable in a lot of ways, and I so badly desired that connection. I recognize now all of these things, right? Because I have done really deep work. Like, we're going to talk about the work in our next episode together, but that in the moment, I had no idea why I was finding myself in the situation that I was in. And much like your story, I was in an abusive relationship in high school. The only way I felt like I could get out of it was to leave the state and go to college in Virginia. And God used that, got me to a Christian university where I had friends, but I hadn't done my work. And so I'm carrying this baggage. I'm just kind of changing my environment, hoping that that will produce a different result. I brought those problems with me into a new environment. And in college, I met someone. I got married. I felt like we had a good relationship. He was a lot like my dad. So I would say emotionally just unavailable. And ultimately, that ended up in a divorce. And while that was very difficult, we were very adult about it and loved our children. And even though there were extended court proceedings and things like that, our kids were protected and loved. But I still didn't do my work. I was devastated. I thought that this was what God had for me. This was a godly marriage. We were both wanting to raise our family in similar ways. And so I left that and found myself in another relationship with somebody who looked very different and was very passionate and very excited about life, and thought that I had all of these great capabilities and was impressed by me. And so I was just flattered and excited about, like, this is so different. And again, it was different, but I still hadn't done my work. And so it still was an unhealthy relationship. And ultimately, that relationship was over 10 years, and we were married and had one child, and it progressed over time to emotionally and physically abusive. And, you know, while everybody owns their part because abuse is wrong, I had to recognize the role I was playing in my own life and the decisions that I was making that was allowing me. And you talked about boundaries, right? And wanting to see the best in people. So similar. Like, these are, seeing the best in people and cheering them on. is what makes you a good coach, right? It's what makes you a good human. But it's also, while it's a great strength, it can be your greatest weakness without boundaries. So, how did you learn to have boundaries? Because I remember when we were talking before we got on here, you were together with that person for 21 years, so a very long time. You have, it's 11 children, right? Yeah,
Yes, 11.
big family. So tell me a little bit about that journey of where you began to realize that you were part of allowing this dynamic in your life.
Well, it was about 3 years ago, or somewhere around there. I don't remember what happened. I'm sure it was both the help of the internet. There's so much about narcissists, but somehow I was able to admit, he is narcissistic. This is abuse. And then that was the beginning of my healing and understanding. I'll back up a little bit. So I have a counselor that I spoke to once in a while over the phone. And I did not believe that God could love me. I mean, intellectually I understood it, but my heart refused to believe it because I didn't deserve love. If I couldn't even behave in such a way where my man could love me and have basic human respect for me, how could God, who is perfect, love me? Like, I messed up, I did this wrong. So she really helped me to understand that God loves me personally. She had me read Psalm 139 and just very slowly read the words, absorb them, pray over it. And she said something that was really key to me. She said, God does not love me because of who I am. God loves me because of who he is. And that was the foundation of the beginning of my healing. To have that's where I started to develop self-esteem, self-respect, and understand that I am equal with everybody else, different, but equal. We all deserve to be treated with dignity. We all deserve to be treated with respect, and that includes myself. And it was really not kind towards God for me to allow people to walk all over myself. So that was the beginning of both learning boundaries, self-respect, and my healing.
Well, I'm really excited to continue our conversation in the next episode so that people can learn a little bit more about how you can come alongside of others who are wanting to work through things from the past that are holding them back, shifting their mindset, rediscovering their worth, and even finding hope through faith. So, thank you so much for being here, listeners. If this episode is something that you feel like would benefit someone you know, I'm asking that you share it because you just never know how the power of someone's story, their testimony, could really impact someone else. And that just by hearing this conversation, they could begin to see something different for themselves. So please share. Would you also like and follow our podcast so that you can get notice of when we have a new episode? Thank you so much for being here, Allison. I look forward to picking up this conversation in the next episode.
Likewise. Thank you, Megan, for having me.